All right, welcome back to another episode of the Show Me the Data podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Carly Dell. She is the Director of Demand Gen at Aircall. Carly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so excited to be here.
Cool. So before we jump in, and one of the things that we're going to be talking about is um, adjusting from an increase in demand in markets that maybe you haven't previously sold to. Before we jump into that, though, can you share a little bit about what Aircall does and who traditionally you were targeting?
Sure, yeah. So Aircall, we're a cloud-based phone system. We primarily focus on SMBs, so small to kind of mid-sized businesses. And we really focus on helping sales and support teams deliver great customer and prospect experiences through voice, right? We all know how powerful voice is, whether you're trying to find out where your order is or you're trying to learn more about a product that you're interested in buying. So Aircall is there to help our customers, really deliver value or bring value to voice. And so primarily the types of businesses that we sell into are, I would say, pretty tech or digitally enabled, right? We're a cloud-based system, right? So we are VoIP technology. And we integrate with a ton of different tools. And so the types of businesses that use us are typically ones that, value things like data and analytics and tracking, kind of monitoring your team. And they want that data to be able to make smarter decisions. And so with that, we have a team that, really focuses on inbound demand gen, right? And so kind of handling all of the companies that come inbound, in addition to a team that focuses on outbound. But the types of companies overall that we focus on are really those that are, digitally enabled and are looking for technology to support them.
Cool. And I guess that brings up kind of the topic of the conversation today and the influx in need for digital transformation that happened. And I'm sure you've probably seen the meme with the cannonball and it's going into a business, and it's, I think that made the rounds quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so Aircall was one of those, if you will, beneficiaries of that digital transformation being expedited in organizations, and probably across industries or companies that you're not used to selling into. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that experience or what process happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, yeah, to your point, we definitely benefited in a lot of ways from kind of the impact that COVID had in the very beginning. And obviously we were really fortunate to be able to support companies who were forced to go remote during that time. So what we actually saw was, I think we all remember like the day when everyone felt like had to go remote, everything shut down. It was just kind of like so much uncertainty. Who knows what's going to happen? And what we found is a lot of more like what we would call like traditional or like less tech savvy industries that we typically didn't really sell too much into because they're just, they weren't ready for a system like Aircall. They were, one day had their normal systems, the next day everything got kind of turned upside down, and they needed to be able to support support their employees in a remote environment. And for their phones, right, most of these traditional businesses had desk phones. And one of the tough things about a desk phone is it doesn't leave your desk, right? So when you leave the office and you're forced into a remote environment, you can't take it with you. So they needed a cloud-based VoIP system to support them during that time. And so what we actually saw was that a lot of those traditional industries like governments, nonprofits, big educational institutions were stuck, and they came to us kind of panicking like, I need a phone and I need it yesterday. What can you do for me? So there was a ton of demand there from those industries that we just weren't ready for, right? We hadn't anticipated, and that was kind of a wave that crashed very quickly on I feel like it was like 1 to 2 weeks in late March, early April, where it was all kind of happening.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's both a good thing and a bad thing, right? And there's lots of things that are happening in the market, and probably more bad news than good news. And being on the other side of it, but in that being said, there's a lot of growing pains that happen with that. So And I imagine one of them being kind of sales enablement content, people that are more traditional, that's not necessarily there for them. So how did the team adjust to this influx of new demand across industries that weren't weren't prior on your radar?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like it was all hands on deck, an absolute team effort to really to handle the demand that we saw. It was yeah, it was a whirlwind. On the sales side, right? It was primarily inbound business that we were funneling to our sales team, and they were again, to your point, dealing with these kind of new personas that they hadn't really sold into in historically or as frequently as some of the more like digitally enabled types of industries that they had previously. But then they were also dealing with buyers who were like, I need this, like I need to be set up end of day today. What can you do for me? And so it put a ton of pressure on the sales team to demo, to show, the value of Aircall, but they didn't even want that. They're like, just please give me the phone. So then, that quickly moved to our onboarding team, who was scrambling to get people up and running, get their users trained, get admins trained, all of those things. And then that trickled down to our CS and our customer care teams, who, in addition to kind of dealing with this influx of new business, were also trying to, kind of maintain expectations within our current customer base, who were reaching out to us saying, I've been forced to go remote. Is Aircall set up for this? Which, we were able to say like, yes, absolutely. You're in a great spot. But, how asking questions like, does my team need to be worried about internet connectivity? There were just so many questions that, our customers had for us. And so CS and customer care had to be like ready to go, ready to field all of those questions. Then on the marketing side, right, we have this huge wave of demand. We're just trying to make sense of it as it's kind of like crashing all over us. And what we ended up doing was we kind of we focus on, okay, what is happening, and just trying to analyze and make sense of everything that was going on. And then also thinking about kind of just like the situation at large and what was happening, which was people were forced to go remote. And so we really focused on, what can we do to support our prospects and customers during this time, right? Like what knowledge or information can we share that will hopefully help, make the transition to remote a little bit smoother, a little bit easier from a product knowledge side, but also from like just we're a remote friendly company. We have a lot of teammates who have been in remote environments. So like what did we have to say that could potentially help during this time? We were absolutely one of many voices who had something to say during that time, but we felt like for our customers and for our prospects, it was important to show that, this was an area that we knew we could support them in, and we really wanted to showcase that during that time.
And so, and even in the way that you're describing it, you could kind of feel like it's such an immediate and need for these businesses as the transition happened. Like we need it now. But I'm assuming that people aren't going out and buying multiple VoIP systems, right? It's once we have one, it's kind of there,
Yeah.
and it's probably there for, I would hope, a long time. So how did the demand after that initial wave, did that immediately kind of fall off, or what was, you mentioned you were looking at data, like what did you anticipate happening, and then what ultimately happened after that first wave of kind of frenzy died?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's so funny to look back at, because at the time I just remember feeling like 24 hours was like a month's worth of time. So much was changing, so much was uncertain. I know that word's been extremely overused, but when all of this was happening, we knew that at some point, right, this demand that we are seeing, or these businesses that were forced to go remote, were going to end up remote and they'd be set up, right? And it's not everyone was forced to go remote at the same time. So we expected that, the time in which kind of everyone had settled was going to be somewhat similar. We just didn't know quite how long that was going to last. So we definitely anticipated that demand was going to die off from those like urgent, I need it now sort of industries. But what we weren't sure about, and what I think like no one was sure about, was for businesses that weren't in those, that maybe like were more digitally enabled, what was going to happen to them, right? Were they still going to be interested in buying? Would they have budgets? Were they going to freeze hires? What, what was going to happen to their business? So that piece to us was definitely, we were quite unsure of. But what we ended up doing, and what was extremely valuable to us, and what really set us up for success over the remainder of the quarter and into this quarter, was we leveraged our customer data to understand trends within our own different like segments of our customers, to see like, is anyone thriving right now, right? Like, are there businesses out there that are actually doing well and are seeing growth during this time? And what we found in looking into our data was like, yes, there actually were some industries that, because of the product or the service that they offered, were able to respond or react to COVID in a really positive way. So once that initial demand from those like, I need it now, traditional style businesses kind of died off, and we did this analysis to see, okay, like, is anyone doing well? And we found those industries that were doing well. We were able to then, build a strategy around, all right, let's double down here, because we don't know what else is going to happen, but we can see in our own data that this is going well right now. So this is the best bet we can take at this time.
That's awesome. And were they all prior buyer personas that you were going after, did you find, or was there even a mix of some of those initial, and there may be different levels of escalation, let's say, where there's the really, really need it now, and then some that are a little bit less? Was it a mix of those kind of new markets that you had found yourselves in, or was it primarily customers that had been using Aircall before, as you mentioned, were maybe more digitally savvy, and it was just those areas where you saw strength in the data?
Yeah, exactly. So it was customers that we had had prior to COVID, who we had historically targeted, who we knew kind of were great fits for our business. Selling into there was just less friction than there would be with kind of some of those more traditional industries. And so, yeah, what we found was those businesses that had been with us before, that were in these, were in industries that were performing really well during this time. And we were able to then say, all right, we already know so much about these industries, right? We know these, we can talk to our customers, we can do interviews with them, we can dig into like their users and their data, and really understand, why they're seeing success right now, and then turn that into a playbook for, driving more business.
Cool. And so that transition happens, and then is it immediately, and we're going through a period where there's a ton of inbound demand? Was the transition then, okay, now we know who's having success in this point, let's shift to being more proactive versus reactive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I felt like a broken record in April and May. I was like, I'm so sick of reacting to everything. I want to be proactive. Like, please, I want to own what's happening in my life. I want to own what's happening in my job. Like, just give me something to be proactive about. So what we actually ended up doing was, yeah, we were reacting for a long time, and we knew we'd continue to react. We didn't know what was going to happen for the weeks to come. So we knew that was going to still happen, but we knew we had this pocket of growth within our customer base, and we knew that we could be proactive in acting against that. And what we had seen actually on the outbound side in the beginning of COVID was that things really slowed down, and I think it was just because no one knew what was going to happen, and no one was ready to buy anything, especially for a B2B business. And so we we needed to kind of like spark some sort of growth on the outbound side. Our targets hadn't changed, right? We were still, we didn't want to slow down or kind of reduce targets in any way. So we really did focus in on what can we do to kind of give outbound something that they can really run with and see success with, and kind of coupled that with some support on the inbound side as well. But what we really focus a lot of this on the outbound side.
So, and I'm sure you probably have heard these stats in different conversations where it's becoming harder and harder to engage with business buyers. And there's kind of two issues there. One is with people working remotely, having access to the right contact details. The other side of it is people aren't sitting at their desk and they're overwhelmed with emails now. So um, as you kind of shifted to this outbound strategy, you kind of honed in on the accounts by looking at data. How were you finding success in engaging with the people that you wanted to talk to? Like what channels did you find work best? Was it different messaging? What adjustments did you have to make now rather than maybe how you had looked at it before?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we absolutely have seen what you just explained. I, as a buyer myself, right, like I'm overwhelmed with the amount of messages that are coming my way. And, you're just trying to balance everything out right now. So where we probably made our biggest adjustment was really in our messaging and kind of how we approached our kind of target prospects. In that there was no really hard sell going on. We tried to just be really empathetic in our messaging, tried to, really be understanding of the fact that, people are overwhelmed right now in so many different ways. And so we adjusted our messaging, and then with that, made sure that throughout all of our kind of main channels that we were activating, which was we were leveraging LinkedIn, email, phone, obviously. We leveraged some retargeting through Rollworks for like account-based marketing, and then also virtual events. And so through all of that, we wanted to make sure that not only were we delivering, thoughtful messaging, but that it was really, really personalized to each business that we were targeting. And that for us, I think we really tried to stress to the team that's like, take a step back and put yourself in your buyer's shoes right now. Like what would resonate with them, and how do you deliver a message that stands out from all of the like COVID-19, we stand with you, whatever sort of things that were going on. And so, yeah, for us, it was really about the messaging, and giving our SDRs the ownership to deliver those really personalized experiences through our kind of similar channel mix that we had used previously.
And with when you talk about personalization, were you thinking about it and just coming back to that data that you analyzed, was that a core of that messaging in terms of taking it, and when we think of personalization, like personalization to the fact of we work with companies in your industry, we understand what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we're helping them. Like, would you be interested in learning more? Was that kind of the idea, or was it more on, hey, Carly, I know you like pizza on Fridays. Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what kind of personalization were you running with the
Yeah.
team?
That's also very accurate. So if anyone wants to reach out to me with that message, I would say yes. No, so yeah, so it was I would say it was kind of a combination of those things. So within the industries we were focused on, one of which was health and wellness. And at that time, we had just closed a really cool customer called Mirror, who I think within this period got bought. And so there's a lot of like cool things happening with Mirror. And so for other wellness companies that we were reaching out to, we were able to say, like, here's this customer of ours. This is the type of success they've seen with Aircall. Like, look, they just got acquired. This is really cool. So we were able to use like positive news that has happened within one of our customers to just like showcase the way that we're able to support really growing and scaling companies. But on the flip side, or in addition to that, I guess, like we also wanted to deliver those really personalized messages. I think again, like our inboxes were flooded with like the same COVID messaging over and over. And so we wanted to kind of acknowledge that, right? We weren't trying to pretend like that's not happening, but, deliver messaging that is, more unique or specific to the individual and their business that we are reaching out to.
And what was the impact? So if we think about kind of taking the personalized approach versus maybe the traditional demand gen, which may be less personalized, what impact did you see once you transitioned to the personalization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, there's the impact of there's like quantitative and qualitative impacts, right? So qualitatively, it was really cool. Some of our SDRs were getting messages back from prospects that were like, thank you so much for this message. This is like one of the best emails I've ever gotten. Like, would love to set up a meeting with you, or even like, now's not the right time, but reach back out to me at X date and we'll get in touch. We had someone who reached out to the SDR's boss to be like, hey, by the way, like your SDR is awesome. This was such a great message. So just like shout outs, which is really cool. And I think SDRs don't always get that sort of recognition. I think if anything, I think everyone's kind of, I know I see it on LinkedIn where people just kind of bash SDRs for bad emails. So it was really refreshing to see people celebrating that. So qualitatively, we were seeing that. Quantitatively, we were seeing that not only were we driving more opportunities, right? Like the velocity of which we were driving more opportunities had increased, but we were also qualifying more of those opportunities, which meant that like our targeting was right, our messaging was right. We were kind of handing over the right people to our AEs. But then also that like the opportunity sizes were right too. That's really important for us. Like I think it was like 39% increase in average opportunity size during that time, which is pretty great. So validating on like the targeting piece, but also really validating on the outreach and the experience that we were delivering for prospects. So overall, just a mix of some really validating qualitative things, but also the data was there to really support that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think when people think about kind of personalization and then actually slowing down instead of that spray and pray approach, really the numbers speak for themselves, and being able to, number one, get more positive responses in terms of making people feel good about that outreach. And then the other side of it is also from a business perspective, the size of opportunities is increasing as well on the other side of it, and just being more targeted and adding that personalization level into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Carly, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this story with us. If people wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach out to me. Or if anyone, I don't know if any of your listeners are a member of Revenue Collective, but I'm a member there, so feel free to Slack me if you're a member there.
Cool. Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed another unfluffy episode of the Show Me the Data podcast. If you want to become part of our community with other demand gen leaders and get exclusive access to Q&As with the guests we have on the show, click the link in the description of the podcast.